Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome CoinDesk Executive Director for Global Content, Emily Parker.
Hello, everyone. It is my great pleasure to introduce our next guest. He is probably most well known to most of you as one of the greatest chess grandmasters of all time. He's not here to talk about that exactly. He's here to talk about the role of Bitcoin in the fight for freedom, for human rights, and various other topics. So please extend a warm welcome to Garry Kasparov. Who will be speaking with me.
Yes.
Welcome, Garry. It's such a thrill to have you here. So I'm sure you are well known by many of the people in this room. And I think people who do know you and know your background will find it pretty unsurprising that you're into crypto now. It just makes a lot of sense. But for those who haven't been following as carefully, can you just quickly describe to us what drew you into Bitcoin? What attracted you to crypto in the first place?
Yes, you said they know me, but I'm sure it's the first thing they recall is that I lost a match to a computer. So it's the first knowledge worker who had his job threatened by a machine. But I had a few other things in my life. So it's from the very early days. You know, it was my interest to technology. I grew up in the Soviet Union, so we had very little, if any, contact with Western technology. And I remember my first impression when I saw a computer. It's in 1983, anybody recalls the name Acorn Computers? People not too old here. Oh, yeah, well, great, yes. So I played a match in London. It was a semi-final candidates match, and I saw the computer, and I won the match, and they also just, they said if I'd like to have it, and I grabbed it with me. So I remember I had a huge monitor, wrapped in a blanket and carrying it in aeroplane flight. I think I was the first person in Baku, city of Baku. It's the fourth largest city in the Soviet Union. So I had a computer. Of course, I played games there. So but I was so fascinated. And in 1985, I talked to my German friends, it's journalists and computer experts, asking them to do a first chess program, chess-based. So advising that it's time for us to actually merge, chess with technology. And the first program was run on the computer that many can recall, Atari 286. Yeah, and as a result of that, I had a contract with Atari for a year, and I brought 53 Atari computers to Soviet Union, and that was the beginning of the first computer club in Moscow, so in 1997. So that's the very beginning. And then I just, I looked for, every opportunity to actually bring chess and technology together. So before I played these famous matches with Deep Blue in 96, 97, so I played other matches with machine. But also I thought, there was a time to actually use chess as the ideal field to test the best ways of human-machine collaboration. So again, after 1997 match, I thought you cannot beat them, join them. So, also, I was pretty active from early days in fighting for freedom in the Soviet Union as a young world champion. And since I left professional chess in 2005, I joined pro-democracy movement, built a coalition fighting Vladimir Putin's rising dictatorship. And also, I became chairman of Human Rights Foundation following one of my late heroes, Václav Havel, who was the first chairman of this organization. So then you could see how these two paths merged. So the interest in technology and my belief that freedom should be protected by every way possible, and technology played a key role in this. And I remember that my first introduction to Bitcoin was probably 2013, 2014 at one of the Oslo Freedom Forum. It's a signature event of Human Rights Foundation. And I have to say that first I was skeptical. But more and more, I realized that this is the way to move forward, because it's a unique combination of technology that empowers individuals and our way to resist pressure, not only from governments like Putin's government or Xi Jinping or Iranian mullahs, but also the governments in democratic countries that accumulated so much power that they could easily threaten our savings and our freedom to make decisions, or free decisions with our funds. So for me, again, it's the appearance on this stage is a very, very natural progression of all the ideas that have been, circulating in my head over the last few decades.
So we talked about this a little bit earlier. I think for some people, this idea of Bitcoin in the fight for freedom is a little bit abstract. So I was wondering if you might be able to tell us some stories or examples you've seen of individuals actually using Bitcoin in their fight for freedom.
Ooh,
or crypto, rather.
I think the list, yeah, it's actually, it's a precise correction, because yes, Bitcoin is still a dominant factor in this fight for freedom, but many other coins being used. And I don't know where to start. So let's start with the war that's going on in Ukraine now. So it's at least $100 million in coins have been sent, mostly Bitcoins, of course, sent to Ukraine in the early days to help them to procure whatever they needed to fight back. So that's one story. 2 years ago, there was a big protest in Belarus against Belarusian dictator, and the Human Rights Foundation was actively involved in collecting funds. More than $5 million raised in coins, so to support the freedom movement in Belarus. Hong Kong, it's this repressive government. This is controlled by Beijing. Limited abilities to fund any dissident operations, but you still have the Bitcoin ATMs. So that's a way to move forward. Then you can look at countries like Iran. So this is for many people there is the only way not only to become political activists. It's too dangerous and actually deadly in Iran, but the way to receive funds from their families abroad. So it could go from country to country. So in Africa, Nigeria, the big protest in 2020, students' protest, was funded exclusively by coins. Zimbabwe, the country we know that's famous for its mega inflation. This is Mugabe, late dictator, publishing this 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollar note. So the country is also operating on Bitcoin, and that's the way any opposition can actually hope to move forward. And then you can talk about some more geopolitical elements, like in Western Africa. That's the region is still very much under the spell of French colonialism. This CFA, this is the colonial franc, and you have Togo and Senegal now trying to actually get just under the stump of this old colonial asset, and they just they look for coins as the way to move forward. There will be a conference in December this year that will try to elevate the region, from its colonial past, because it's a classical story. If you depend on financial instrument that controlled by someone else, so then you are at mercy. So the France devalued its CFA by 99% against euro. So that's it, and that kills everything that is connected. Same as even in this country. So you make your savings, but then then inflation goes up because of the policies made by unelected officials. Yeah, and while I'm sure not everybody in this hall approves these goals, but Freedom Convoy in Canada. So again, I'm fully vaccinated, so I just did.
Garry,
but it was a moment where the government basically stamped on all the transactions, done through official financial channels. But 70% of the funds have been received through Bitcoin and other coins transactions.
So I think that's great. Thank you for bringing such a wide range of specific examples.
You asked me to be.
Yeah, I did. I asked him to do it.
I covered from every part of the world. Yes,
but thank you for doing it.
Be aware of your wishes.
No, that was great. But I just want to, I come from a very similar background to you, not about crypto specifically, but looking at kind of the potential of the internet and social media in the fight against authoritarian countries, right? So I'm very familiar with this background. So just to play devil's advocate a little bit here, some of the arguments that I get all the time.
I'm going to fight, yes.
Okay, let's go for it. So one of the big arguments that you hear is that, yes, you're right, there are these use cases, but they're still fairly niche. They're not very widespread. You're talking about putting aside Ukraine, that's actually a very amazing example, but a lot of these other examples, it's a relatively small number of individuals using cryptocurrency, and they're not really challenging the government in any significant way. These governments in a lot of these countries are still very much in control, and they're very much sort of dominating. I'm just curious how you respond to that, because I think that's something that a lot of people think.
Yeah, you made it's an important comment saying let's take Ukraine out of the equation.
Well, just for a moment.
Yeah, but that's and I don't think we can do it, because that's what happens. Yes, it's small case here, small case there. There's many small cases. Though I I don't feel comfortable talking about individual lives as something small. Yes, you said maybe in a big picture, when you look at the Chinese dictatorship, Putin and Iranian ayatollahs and other, thugs, dictators and terrorists. Yes, this is. But we're talking about human lives, and they're not few of them. We're talking about thousands and thousands of lives. But Ukraine is actually a demonstration how this can help people on big scale.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not trying to say that, there are negatives of Bitcoin and crypto, and you cannot disregard that. But still, I look at the balance, and also I look in the future. It's a process, The big guys and the bad guys, they stay there, and they have been there forever. But the number of, as you say, small cases, it keeps adding, adding. It drop after drop, and then eventually it will melt stones away.
Yeah, I think that's for the record. I agree with you, but I want I think it's important. I think it's important. Yes. It is important to articulate these arguments clearly, because I think a lot of people haven't really bought into it. So I just want to turn to the internet for a moment, because I know you do a lot of work also on just like internet and internet freedom. And I think Russia is a really interesting example, because I think the story of the internet in Russia is really interesting. For a while, the Russian internet was actually relatively free. It's not so much anymore, but you could basically find most information that you wanted on the internet. And there was a moment when people were really excited about the potential of the internet in Russia to kind of really challenge Putin's regime. Kind of around 2011, 2012, there were demonstrations organized on Facebook, some of the largest protests since the fall of the Soviet Union. Russia's most prominent opposition figure, Alexei Navalny, basically was born out of the internet, still has a very popular YouTube channel, but some would say didn't succeed, right? I mean, there was really, people thought that the internet was really going to challenge, Putin's hold, and that's not quite how it turned out. I'm just curious, because you can see where I'm going with this, right? There were some of these expectations, similar expectations that we sometimes see for crypto, and I'm just curious what your analysis is of that situation.
No, look, it's a good question, and this is what's happened in Russian internet. Actually, it's inspired me to actually to be more engaged in cyber business. So that's why last 6 years I'm working with Avast software, the security ambassador, because I understand that again. It's a double-edged weapon. So this is and the way Putin and his regime used internet to promote their agenda, I think it's quite a fascinating story. Because I think in 2004, 2005, when we go all the way back to the beginning of my political activities, open political activities, let's say Putin regime had to make a choice. So how you deal with internet? Still 90% of Russia was under spell of television propaganda, but you have more and more people getting in, internet was growing. So you had two choices. One was obvious, like China, firewall, block everything. By the way, that's what's happening now in Russia. But they made a far more sophisticated choice based on their understanding that, you can either block it or you can flood it. And what they did, was very creative. That's how they built, troll factories and fake news industry that eventually, played a role even in American elections and across the free world. So it's, you don't have the same, classical approach like a Pravda newspaper, front page, or 9 o'clock news. This is the only story that you have to buy. Everything else is nonsense. No. The idea was, okay, it's selling doubts. I used to call Putin merchant of doubt. You don't have to tell this is the only product you can buy, the logical product. But it's basically telling, truth, nobody knows. Yeah, maybe we're not good, but nobody's good. Maybe Russian democracy is not perfect. Nothing is perfect. And then you had so many like new portals, constellation of websites, and they all carry some stories. 90% is correct. It's true. But then you always have this little bit poison here and poison there. And what happens that is this: you have people coming in. They look around. That's interesting website, and they stick, to one or two.
Right.
So that most of the traffic that was accumulated over years, on Russian internet has been grabbed by these, fake sites. So this is, but it was extremely effective. And then after doing it in Russia, they moved it to the so-called near abroad, Russian-speaking universe, the former Soviet republics. Then they moved to Eastern Europe, then to Europe, and eventually, they already attacked American elections in 2015, 2016, having nearly a decade, actually probably more than a decade, of experience of operating these, in this environment, because I was actually fascinated how they could create even a whole conversation. Because a simple way to say, Garry Kasparov is a traitor. Oh, no, that's too simple, too primitive. But you can see the whole, discussion on the page constructed by trolls. One says, he's a traitor. No, he's a great chess player. And, oh, but, I fully approve his chess, but I don't think he's... And you have a whole debate. It looks like a genuine conversation, but it's all, just, constructed.
Well, Russia's just such a fascinating example because it's an example of a country where you have, very state-dominated media and a very, the Kremlin trying to control
very
the media.
State is just, it's dominated is understatement.
Right, state-controlled media. But you also have an internet where basically all the information can be found, and yet it hasn't quite done, what some people expected to, for the reasons that you said, right?
Yeah, but exactly, it's you have to follow very specific websites. And by the way, they were very good. If they saw that something could grow too big, boom, they just cut it. But it was more like a pinpoint. So this is not a massive mass terror. Now they're shifting to old Soviet model, Stalin's model. But for many years they have been far more flexible. And that's why they create a lot of political capital. And that's why it was even more difficult for us in the free world, in the West, to blame Putin for mass human rights violations. Because people point out, oh, but look at there, you still have enough freedom. This is not China, this is not Soviet Union, and you cannot call Putin a dictator.
So we're seeing kind of, as you described in Russia, this similar dynamic where it's kind of a battle between the government and technology and or the government and the people. And are you seeing that in crypto as well? Are you seeing kind of like people using crypto to fight for freedom and then governments trying to take that control back?
Yeah, naturally, the battle in the free world, in the unfree world, it's not the same. Because, in countries like Russia or in China or just in other countries, oppressive regimes, so they try to control it for the reason of just political control. But when you look at this country or Canada or just, European countries, government is still the government. At the end of the day, government wants to grab more power. And naturally, the governments, they enjoyed, I'm not sure it's the right word, but it's just to exercise enormous power over every financial asset. So that's why the idea of Bitcoin, something that is decentralized, something is that, that it offers a peer-to-peer, just communication, as original Skype. We already forgot that. I think first 3 versions of Skype were peer-to-peer. Then, of course, with Microsoft, it's changed. So, and it's cloud, and it's something that's the government, I think, treated as they own it, and I think it's a natural pushback from people, because we have enormous power in our pockets. Every device is 1,000 times more powerful than a crazy supercomputer. Yeah, but just how can we use it? So how can we protect ourselves against any abuse? Yes, it's not that bad in America as in Russia, but still, you look at the decisions made by unelected officials that hurt our freedom or our wallets, and I think it's natural that the society, the free society, is looking for ways to push back and to limit government's ability to control our lives.
So this morning we talked a little bit about some of the challenges, like what is preventing more people for using Bitcoin for human rights purposes, and you said regulation, and I was wondering if you might be able to elaborate on that a little bit.
And I think it's before regulations, it's also, I think it's kind of prejudice, so this is because many things that we're dealing with now, they're so new, and I think we have to go over this, it's like a mud of prejudice, and it's like a fog, so are you sure it's good or not? I've been speaking regularly just on many conferences about AI, and this is one of the biggest concerns. Oh, we're ending to the end of the world, the superintelligence, singularity, and this is all these Terminators, and then the Matrix, they will rule our lives. Look, my response is, look, it's not, AI is not a magic wand, but it's not a Terminator. It's not a harbinger of utopia or dystopia. It's a tool. It's created by humans, and it's very important to understand, that it's everything we do is just, it could be used for good or bad.
Right.
So and I think it's first, we just have to, just to bring these ideas to the public mind. So it should be dominant thought that is just, it's inevitable. This is not, because regulations made by the government can be made only if this government, works with our apathy. But if we are actively involved, just in pushing, our agenda, so this is the change, the positive change from our perspectives, no government in a free country can afford doing the regulations. But we're seeing now that even the U.S. government now is contemplating quite a serious, measures to put regulation, the industry under strict control. And I think that will be detrimental, because it will go against the main idea. We need more people to get in. Again, what is the best meme? Number go up. So by the way, everybody who's using Bitcoin somehow contributes to freedom. Even if you don't care about human rights, it's still, because you create, a tiny piece, of like a free territory. So, and keep adding up, freedom, go up.
Yeah, I think your point about governments is important, because we know that no government can stop Bitcoin. Like, that's already been proven. But we also know that governments can make it a lot harder. They can just make it harder for ordinary citizens to use it. And that's something that I think we're seeing in various parts of the world.
Again, there's nothing we can do about Russian government or Chinese government, but just if they want to ban Bitcoin. So, for instance, that's Chinese government making this experiment, which I think will fail spectacularly, because they just don't understand. You cannot have, the digital currency, just controlled by the central bank. It's like oxymoron to me. So this is you can, unless you control the whole world. Right. Because the idea is just exactly the opposite. It's to fight centralized control. But we can and we should do a lot about governments here in this country or in Europe, because it's the governments they like regulations. And as a speaker, just as a speaker for Avast, for 6 years, I attended so many conferences and talked about GDPR. It's a big deal now. This European bureaucracy worked years coming up with. I understand, but basically, how many people use the measures, that is built within the GDPR to protect their own privacy?
Right.
So the problem is, again, every regulation is a double-edged sword. And I think it's just, while we need, some regulations, but we cannot and we should not undermine the creativity of free people. Because that's the way things work, If somebody has any doubts about, the power of free mind and creativity of people in the free world, you just look at the latest crisis in the world, pandemics. Virus came from totalitarian China, vaccine from free America. That's why we need creativity of free people. We should not stand on their way. And why we didn't have all these vaccines and antibiotics before? Because of the FDA regulations. So this is the budgets of all pharmaceutical companies, R&D budgets have been slashed because nobody wants to take a risk.
Are you referring to any specific regulations that you think are about crypto that you think are going in the wrong direction?
I think I'm actually expecting that soon we'll see more, from the government, because we had a talk here, and it seems to be this administration and actually many policymakers, they are just looking for crypto with almost in horror. Because it's even in democratic countries, the governments used to have unlimited power in their hands, and they know that they have elections and people can vote them down, but just between elections, they have full control. And it seems now that the control is slipping out of their hands, and I think unfortunately, they're very creative in limiting our creativity, which doesn't.
Well, on that sort of kind of the fear of Bitcoin, do you think that Bitcoin could pose a serious threat to the U.S. dollar, for example, in terms of dominance?
I think it's not. I think it's inevitable.
Inevitable.
I think again, the dollar is getting weaker because look, at the end of the day, this is the reserve currency in the world. It's like a black hole. You have a huge, huge debt that keeps, and the government keeps adding up, more and more on top of that. I don't know the exact numbers, but when you look at the global GDP and the amount of all the derivatives, I think it's something like, it's 25 times more. So basically the entire financial system in the world is a black hole. So this is, no matter what we do, it's bottomless. So I think it's very natural that we're looking for means to actually defend ourselves against the gravity of this black hole. And I think it's a matter of time, 5, 10 years, whatever it takes. But the basket of crypto will become a dominant force, because at the end of the day, people want to have financial assets that they can rely on. And can you rely on assets that are controlled by someone else? And by the way, globalization means that there will be less and less willingness to actually give America, United States, all powers to actually control the system by printing more greenbucks.
Well, I think one of the challenges in the Bitcoin narrative, at least here in the US, is that, for some people, they don't quite see the same urgency as they would in other countries, right? Countries that are plagued by like hyperinflation. Yeah, there's a lot of inflation now in the US, but it's relatively new, right? Yeah. So I don't think many Americans are really concerned about their bank account being frozen. They don't think necessarily in that same way. And so when people talk about Bitcoin for freedom from the government, a lot of people don't really kind of get that, and they just see Bitcoin as like a speculative instrument. I mean, that's a media narrative that's quite prominent. So I guess,
which is, yes, but
right. But I guess the question is like, how would you make the case to people in democratic countries who don't feel that their money is going to be confiscated, who don't, they don't feel that threat. I mean, I don't think most people here feel the threat that their money is going to be confiscated by the government or that, so they don't quite have that same sense of urgency. How would you make that case to them that Bitcoin is critical for purposes like that?
Yeah, but depends on the definition of confiscating. So, but but if you're, if money that you keep in a bank, just it keeps, shrinking, so that's just the amount, so that's some form of confiscation. And the fact is that, you have almost zero interest rate policy.
Right.
What's the point? I mean, with the whole idea, Bitcoin or argument against gold in the past, you cannot have interest on that, but you don't have interest on your cash. So what kind of policy it is? So basically, the whole idea of central banks is basically to keep interest low, to pay, the interest rate on the debt, and also to force people to actually throw money into the economy. So why should we play their game? No, we have to follow the rules now, but why don't we look for alternatives? So because again, any alternative will actually make them, more reliable. They need to see some pressure from us to actually to become more realistic. Because as of now, again, we're in the hands of bureaucrats that make their decisions, and through inflation and inflation instruments and other means, they eat alive our savings, and also they limit our ability to move money the way we want.
I think the problem is that when Bitcoin is as volatile as it is, right? I think people don't necessarily feel...
Volatile means what?
Meaning that it's going up and down.
But that's as market does. But
right,
yeah.
Right. But I'm just saying in terms of just again, making the case that it's a way to protect your savings. I think it's hard. It can be, some people would have a hard time buying into that.
No, but again, you just look at Bitcoin. Let's talk about that's the top top cryptos like Bitcoin and ETH. So they fluctuate with the market. Oh yeah, they lose more than the market, but they go with the market and they gain more than the market. So it's a natural fluctuation. We may call speculative asset. It's a high risk asset, but it operates as a part of global financial system. And as for some very speculative assets that actually dropped from Mount Everest to the bottom of the sea, so like Terra or Luna. Okay, that's called market. We had speculations on the market, from the first day when money was invented. So that's why people are complaining about things that were absolutely natural. So for the market, and again, if you want high benefits, you have to take a very high risk. And crypto offered you opportunities. Don't play. I mean, stick to Bitcoin and ETH, and then you will not suffer the same setbacks.
So Gary, we only have about a minute left. I just want to turn back to Russia because you've been, so active in sort of the dissident movement there and part of the opposition. Is there hope for the Russian opposition? And what will it take? Because right now it seems pretty dark, right? So many media sites have been shut down. So much of the opposition has fled the country. What will it take?
Look, it's a very dark moment for my country. It's people who peacefully marched with me on the streets of Russia. So either in exile like myself, in jail like Alexei Navalny, or even killed like Boris Nemtsov. And Russia now, I feel it's also this responsibility. We are all carrying responsibility for the war crimes on industrial scale committed by Russian troops in Ukraine. And this stigma will stay with us, as with Germans, for years, if not for decades. But I believe there's a hope, and our hope is for Ukraine to win the war. I believe that the liberation of Ukraine, liberation of Crimea, is the first day of liberation of Russia from Putin's fascism. And that's why I'm doing everything I can, helping Ukraine to win, restore its sovereignty. And don't forget, this is not just about Ukraine, its territory. It's a front line of battle between freedom and tyranny. And that's why, what are we doing here? It's also part of this battle. Ukrainian victory will help us to move in the right directions. So in the world where, we'll be in charge of our future.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Thank you.
Everybody, important announcement. There is actually an opportunity to play chess with Garry and probably lose.
It's somewhere there, just it's this. You have to.
Yeah, there's still time to play chess with Garry. He's kindly offered to
prepare,
do this. Yeah. So I think to do this, you need to visit the NFT marketplace for info. But I would, take him up on it. It's a cool experience. So Garry, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.